Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, Thursday's 5-hour humanitarian ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is over. The pause in fighting largely held, but the Israeli military says 3 mortars were fired into Israel from Gaza during that period of calm. During the 10 days of conflict, Gaza health officials say over 200 Palestinians, mostly civilians, have been killed. As VOA's Gabe Joselow reports from Gaza, the people there are growing weary with war.
It was Friday night when the missiles hit the Sisi family home in Gaza City. First there was the warning shot, a non-destructive hit that the Israeli military calls the knock on the roof. Minutes later, a devastating missile barrage. Luckily, the family was able to get out alive, but their home was destroyed, a casualty of Israel's ongoing assault against Hamas militants in Gaza. Anwar Mohammed lived in the building with 6 members of his family. He says no one here was a militant.
Being a Palestinian means you are a target for the Israeli airstrikes. We are just normal people. They don't just hit militants. No one in this house is a member of a resistance movement.
More than 180 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict. According to the United Nations, most have been civilians. The Al-Nur Mosque was destroyed by Israeli fire days into the conflict. The military said Hamas had been storing weapons inside. The attacks have disrupted daily life in Gaza. An Egyptian-brokered ceasefire deal accepted by Israel fell through on Tuesday when Hamas objected to the terms. Local resident Hussein Al-Nemnen's market was damaged in the attack on the mosque. He says Palestinians cannot accept a deal without real guarantees that the violence will stop.
For any ceasefire deal, I want a guarantee this will never happen again. Because if I go and rebuild my market and they bomb the mosque or the police station, it will be damaged again. This doesn't make any sense to me.
As fighting continues to rage between the two sides, thousands of Palestinians have sought shelter at UN-run schools in Gaza. Many came from the northern side of the territory after receiving phone calls or leaflets from the Israeli military warning them of coming operations. Resources are scarce in Gaza, and the closing of borders in the current conflict has put more pressure on people. Hamas has called for lifting of the Israeli blockade as part of any possible ceasefire. Saham Abu Hossa, who came here with her extended family, blames the leadership from all sides for her situation.
We want good people in positions of power, not the bad people who are responsible for our suffering. The good ones should help us, because no one else in the world is experiencing what my family is going through right now.
But as ceasefire hopes dwindle and missiles and rockets continue to fly, there's no obvious end in sight to the suffering.
Well, Gabe Joselow has changed locations and he now joins us via Skype from Jerusalem. Gabe, the 5-hour ceasefire was requested by the United Nations to allow residents of that densely populated Gaza Strip to gather food and supplies. But now there are hints that a larger ceasefire, or at least a truce, is in the works. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, what we understand is that Egypt, which has been trying to broker a more comprehensive ceasefire deal, is still working on such a truce. There were some reports earlier that Israel had accepted some of the terms, but those were later denied by Hamas, and Israeli officials sort of stepped back from it. So what we've seen is that since this temporary humanitarian ceasefire ended, there's been a resumption of violence. We've seen a slew of rockets sent from Gaza into southern Israel, and also Israeli airstrikes have returned to hit back at Hamas militant positions.
Now, we know that in all this there have been minimal, if any, casualties on the Israeli side. Can you talk a little bit about the systems that Israel has put in place to ensure that?
That's right. Palestinians have suffered much more in this crisis. There have been over 220 of them killed. But despite over 1,000 rockets being sent from Gaza into southern Israel, there have been very few casualties on that side. 1 person was killed, about half a dozen people have been injured. The way it works is there's a pretty substantial high-tech system called Iron Dome in place, which actually sends rockets up into the air to intercept rockets that are coming from Gaza. So when we're in southern Israel, we can see sometimes a shot will go up from Gaza, and then you'll see a second shot come from the Israel side, and a puff and a boom in midair, and that rocket is defeated. So they've stopped maybe 25 or 30% of the rockets that are coming from Gaza, but some still do hit in Israel. They're just not quite as targeted as the Israeli strikes, and also Israeli citizens have bunkers and shelters that they can run to.
Yes, now Hamas for sure knows that it cannot win against the Israeli military might. What is their goal in these attacks?
Well, the longer a conflict like this goes on, the more Israel's going to have to strike back. And you've seen the international community really being angry with the Israeli response, which is quite aggressive. You're seeing so many more deaths in the Palestinian territory. So it gives Hamas a little bit more leverage in the eyes of the international community when it comes to negotiating what will be an eventual ceasefire deal. I think that most of these conflicts that have been going on for years do resolve in a truce of some kind. So we do expect that will come, if not tonight, then in the coming days, and hopefully as soon as possible for the people of Gaza.
And generally, have you spoken to civilians on both sides? What do they say?
Well, the Palestinians, civilians on both sides, I should say, just want peace more than anything else. Palestinians are especially hopeful that there will be a ceasefire soon because they're really suffering the most. At the same time, there's a bit of support or sympathy for Hamas's position because there's so much hatred for what Israel is doing. On the Israeli side, there's a lot of fear and a lot of panic as you're hearing alerts and alarms, almost every 5 minutes. That there's been another rocket fired from Gaza.
All right, Gabe, thanks a lot. That's VOA's Gabe Joselow reporting live there from Jerusalem.